Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey everyone, it's Susan Coffin, and you are listening to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts audio series. It is the most beautiful day here in New York City, and it's perfect to address the topic that's on all of our minds as this glorious school vacation finally begins. And that is really, how can we give our kids a much-needed summer respite and yet be sure that their academic skills don't take the nosedive that has been documented so frequently to occur during the summer months? So how can we incorporate learning activities without overscheduling our kids and making sure our kids really get a chance to rest and rejuvenate? We're so pleased today to have Jodi Sleeper-Triplett back on Attitude's ADHD Experts again with us to address the topic, the summer learning strategies for ADHD kids. Many of you may know Jodi. She is a longtime master coach and probably the nation's foremost expert on coaching youth with ADHD. She's got a wonderful book called Empowering Youth with ADHD, Your Guide to Coaching Adolescents and Young Adults, which gives parents and professionals very helpful strategies for improving the lives of youth with ADHD. Please visit her website, www.jstcoaching.com. I'll turn it over to Jodi with our great thanks, Jodi, for being here today.
Thanks, Susan. It's so good to be here again, and it is gorgeous here in Northern Virginia, too, after so many people have dealt with the horrible weather, which made me think about being stuck in with kids on a very hot or very rainy day. So I'm hoping that in addition to talking about the learning strategies and how to make summer fun, we can also help you as parents to manage your own anxiety and stress when you are with your kids sort of stuck in. So basically, what I want to share with you are some ideas, strategies that I've come up with and that I've found work for many families. And I'm hoping that as I'm talking, you're coming up with questions that you want to ask me, maybe more specifically related to your situation, because as we know, especially with ADHD and executive functioning problems, no two children are alike. And it's about a bit of trial and error and also exploration. So be willing to be curious about trying something new, even if your gut reaction is, oh no, my kid won't do that. Oh no, that's not going to work. It's amazing how we can just shift a little bit the way we present things to kids, and it does make a big difference. So the first point is teenagers and children in general. We started talking about this as a teenage presentation, but I do want to tailor it to those of you who are here. So for all kids, they're growing and changing every minute. Their brains are always growing. Their bodies, depending on age, we're dealing with hormones. So it's really important, regardless of the age of your kids, that they have time to rest and rejuvenate in the summer so that they can stay healthy, focused, and happy. And what that means is, although it's great to have a busy summer, because nobody really wants their kids to sit around and do nothing. And that's what I hear a lot. Well, we need them to be active. They need to be learning. But there's a point where you want to consider, how does my child learn the best, and what type of rejuvenation is necessary for my child or my children to feel okay about moving forward and getting something done, going on a trip, even spending time reading a book for school for the fall. So think about slightly tweaking morning times. If you're available and your children are at home and you can have them sleep an extra hour, that extra hour, especially for teenagers, makes a huge difference. But set a schedule. Make sure that there's a routine in place that's not totally off track from what you do during the school year. I'd say that's the biggest thing that gets in the way when September comes around. Because when you have a schedule and a routine that's not too loose, meaning get up when you want to, eat when you want to, go to bed when you want to, if that starts to happen, you're going to notice more grumpiness, less focus, problem with your kids getting things done. So it's really helpful to set that structure with a certain understanding that, hey, it's not that we're going to monitor you every minute, but it's about helping your kids to learn the life skills of, hey, it's important to get a little extra sleep, but it's also important to be up at a similar time of day every day so that your body, your brain, your medication, if you take it, food, everything is balanced within your system. Often parents tend to overschedule, and it's hard not to do that when you're working and also when you want your kids to enjoy summer. But I encourage you to think about that downtime as something that can be as valuable. Playtime can be just as valuable, in some ways more valuable, than too many activities. Think about the transition issues. I recently did a program on transitioning, and people were really surprised at the small things that get in the way of a successful transition. When your child has problems paying attention and has difficulty trying something new, shifting them from one activity to another during the day is really stressful. The brain needs time to go from activity 1 to activity 2. It would be wonderful if there was a break in between, a bit of downtime, playtime, or let's have a snack, or how about 30 minutes of screen time, computer time, whatever it might be, or listening to music, and then we'll transition into the next activity. If you can do that, that will really help, even on vacations, to make sure that if you're going to be doing a lot of sightseeing, that there's downtime. Bring those iPods, bring other electronics, not to have your kids hyper-focused on electronics, but to give them a break from the activity that they were doing to transition into the next one. And that's a really important piece. So the next piece is to select a variety of activities for your kids that incorporates learning and fun. And here's where I want to sort of play with you on this tip and the next two about putting in an educational component and including your child in the selection and planning process. It all fits together. So the first thing is that when you think about activities, some of the activities are going to be done at home. It might be watching a movie together. It could be, again, incorporating summer reading, other summer activities, SAT prep for your teenagers, incorporating that in on a schedule that needs to be taken care of. Well, in between that, if you want to keep the learning going and continue to help your child be curious and to learn how to gather information, it's really helpful for kids with ADHD to be able to understand how to grasp different concepts because it expands their ability to improve their short-term memory, to stay focused on an activity, and to also have a good time. So, for example, you could go on, let's say you went to a zoo. So you go to the zoo, and before going to the zoo, maybe there's a worksheet that you and your child can create that has to do with field work. Okay, we're going to prep for this field work. The field work is going to be going to the zoo and looking for the different animals. What are your favorite 3 animals that we want to investigate when we get to the zoo? And then out of those 3, your child might be asked to write a little paragraph on it or read a book that's related. Giraffe just came to mind. So let's just imagine that the giraffe is your child's favorite animal. Well, what is it about giraffes that you could use as a learning experience? So the zoo trip doesn't end at the zoo. It carries on. And from there, there's always going to be something fascinating about that giraffe that leads into something else. So that's where you go into your child's curiosity and say, okay, so when you think about the giraffe, who might be the giraffe's worst enemy or best friend in the jungle? and continue that. That could be a week-long project with drawing, reading, listening to information online, watching videos, anything that will connect it. You can do the same thing with museums, historic sites, and national parks. Figure out what is it that you want to explore, or what's your takeaway at the end of an activity or a vacation. What's your top 10 list? Do a little David Letterman. What are the top 10 things that you got out of what we just did, or where we went? What was the most fun, and what do you never want to do again? Laugh about those things that your child moaned and groaned about, because that helps them hear from you and feel the sense that you really get it, that they're not going to love everything, and that you want to know what worked for them and what didn't. It's great information from you, and it's actually a very nice bonding experience for you and your child. So this is where I was talking about creating the educational component. So regardless of the type of field trip or activity you're doing, figure out how you might extend that. One of the things I was looking up earlier today to prepare for my talk, I was on Amazon looking at all their fun. I just put in fun facts, and I found trivia books, history books, that just have the fun stuff that you never would think about to ask or to learn about history. There's so much out there that can be attached to what you're doing that will allow your kids to enjoy their time, especially when you're working with elementary school and middle school kids. For teenagers, you might want to connect it to what their summer activities are, or as I mentioned, like the SAT prep. What are some specifics that relate to those SAT questions, whether that's doing some reading on a specific topic, or going to see, I'm here in the DC area, going to see the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, being able to look at some of old documents and read them, and maybe do some reading about that from a historical perspective. So it's connected to an actual outing, not just go to your room, pick up this book and read it. So connecting those two can be really helpful. Now, with all of this, just to remind you, I want to be sure that you are considering that schedule that I mentioned at the beginning. What do your kids need to be doing over the summer? Is there a certain type of exercise that needs to be built in, or occupational therapy, going to a therapist, a tutor, SAT prep? Build it in and build the fun around it so that your kids will do what they need to be doing because they have to. But at the same time, there's an understanding and an excitement about whatever's going to come next. So that's why, as I say on the next slide, to include your teen in the planning process. Sometimes it's difficult to get younger kids to do some of the specifics, but if you make a short list of activities, you can have them get involved in the process of what they might want to do, and have activities that are for rainy days, days when it's too hot like yesterday, and then those for outside. And it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money, absolutely not. So here's an idea that I came up with, and I was thinking about the sort of the homework, that dreaded word, you might want to call it something else, but the learning homework that you want your children to do. You want them to learn about something over the summer. You want them to be able to go beyond sitting in front of the TV or playing video games all day. Having a fact-finding mission with friends, coming up with some of the topics, or even combining an activity, an outing, with another family, if that's possible. Sometimes I know it's hard to coordinate schedules, but if there's a way to do that, or if one of your child's friends is someone you feel comfortable taking along on an outing, that will actually help with the learning, because they will ask each other questions. And you can pose questions to them and start a conversation, even in the car, about a fact-finding mission. What is it that we want to find out when we go on this field trip to the park? What do we want to learn? Well, there's nothing to learn at the park. Well, of course there is. And start talking about the different things, like how come there's not as much grass under the swings as on the rest of the park grounds? You know, what is it that makes that all like dirt instead of grass? Now, you know, basically we know it's because kids' feet and the grass doesn't grow, but it's still something that they can have a conversation about and investigate. You know, how far does that area span, and where do we have green grass again? And anything, finding a couple of bugs and investigating those. So making it fun and exploratory at the same time, because those conversations can continue at dinner, in the car, when you go to grandma's or you go to visit other families, a family reunion. It's so much more fun for your kids to go share what they learned about something specific, rather than, you know, we go to the pool a lot and we swim. Great. Well, when you were at the pool, one of the things you can do for your kids is to look at that activity from a new perspective. And the pool is the example. Swimming is what I want to use. Think about how much math is involved in swimming laps, figuring out how much water is in a pool, how much chlorine they need to put in. If you're going to the ocean, you know, how deep is it in certain areas, the same as with a pool. You can create a project with your child. They can do it themselves. You know, what is it that math helps with when it comes to designing a swimming pool, making sure there's enough water and enough space for people to swim? It's a great way to look at using different types of measurement, talking about the metric system, talking about math, and then scientifically in terms of talking about water and the buoyancy of different things. Once you know what your child's level of interest is, you can vary those conversations. And as I said, don't feel as though we are in a position as parents to have to know everything. And the reason I say that is I don't want you to stress out about, oh my gosh, I'm not good at math. I can tell you math is not my favorite subject. But the idea of looking at something from a curious perspective, from something just a little bit different, can be extremely helpful when you're working with your kids, because that leads into the value of math, the value of doing that SAT prep, the value of working on some of those math problems with the tutor. It does make a difference when your kids can connect it to real life. And here's an opportunity, a great opportunity. So consider all those different things that you could do. The other piece that is important when you consider looking at things from a different perspective, many of our children who have ADHD are kinesthetic learners. They need to move. They need to see things, feel things, experience the world. We know that, and sometimes it's really difficult for them to be in a classroom learning. So to use the summer as an opportunity for learning while walking, running, standing, biking, swimming, doing things that are kinesthetic and having fun with it. And instead of pushing the sit down at the desk and do the work, have some of that, because you want to continue to encourage your children to learn, you know, in an environment that mirrors what they're doing at school. But once again, it's summer. And if they can expend more energy and learn how to do it, a great conversation that you could have with your kids as they're preparing to go back to school is, you know, let's think for a minute of how different it was when you were learning while you were walking around, while we were biking, what you noticed. How does that compare to when you're in the classroom? And what might you do differently to make it easier to learn while you're in the class, sitting at a desk with the teacher? and come up with some strategies. It's what we do in coaching. There's no reason why you as parents can't ask those same questions. There's always a different perspective, whether that's you, the grandparents, your kids, your spouse, your partner. The next thing is to help your teenager specifically plan and prioritize summer academic requirements amidst the pull of friends, jobs, sleep, and everything else. So teens have this issue where when they hit 14, sometimes 13, they're able to get, at 14, legally they can get a job in many places. So here they are in the summer having a part-time job, needing to do some work over the summer. As I said, many of your children will be with tutors, SAT prep, working on summer, maybe even taking a class in the summer to improve a grade or to enrich themselves. The summer enrichment programs are fantastic, but that takes time. So how do you help your teenager plan that out? Even if you're not great at planning and time management, you can help them just simply use a calendar. You don't need to work with an actual planner if you don't want to. You can have a big calendar, use the months of, well, June's almost over, July and August, and just have your teenager write down all the things that are happening and the time frames. By seeing that, actually physically seeing it on the page, that will help them to understand how busy they're going to be, how long certain activities take, and when it's appropriate to bring in time with friends, time to sleep, time to rest, and even family time. One of the pieces that is hard for teenagers when I'm coaching, I always find that their sense of how long it's going to take to do something is a bit off track. So the first thing to do would be to plan in and on the calendar those activities that are pretty static. So you know it's 1 hour with the tutor. It might be 2 hours with SAT prep on certain days of the week. Maybe the job is 3 hours twice a week or 3 times a week. Plug those in and then talk to your teen about how long is it going to take you not only to get ready to go to work, to the tutor, to the SAT class, how long will it take to get there? Plan all of that into the schedule so that your kids can see how time really looks. And that's an important one because of the executive functioning problems that many of our kids have. So by planning it out, then they can look at the rest and say, well, gee, I want to have a sleepover with my friends. So the best time to do that might be on a Sunday night because I'm busy working on Friday until 7, and then I come home and I'm really tired. All right, great. Well, Sunday you don't work. You just have your morning time to do some reading. So having a friend over at 5 o'clock on Sunday and spending the night would be fine. Talking through it rather than saying, you must do this, you must do that. Big difference. So I encourage you to engage your kids in that. Use timers, use the schedule, and whenever possible, encourage that any academic work that needs to be done is done before the kids get to that point where they are tired, medication is worn off, and definitely before they do anything that is electronic, because the electronics will change the speed and activity in the brain so that it's really hard to then shift back and regroup and work on the schoolwork. So schoolwork first, and then the electronics as the reward, as the whatever you want to call it. It could be an incentive, a reward, or just our mornings are for academics and our afternoons are for play. That's totally up to you as a parent, but I find that makes a huge difference when kids of all ages minimize their electronics and all the exciting stuff that jazzes up their brains. They minimize that before doing their academic requirements so that they get them done and get them done effectively. This is the tough one. It's really tough with your kids who are in elementary school, because negotiation with, let's say, an 8-year-old can be next to impossible if your child is a bit obstinate, doesn't quite understand why something has to be done. And also, it's an age where children really do expect to be told what to do, whether they want to do it or not. So it's being able to manage that, and at the younger ages through elementary school, I'd say up until about age 11, maybe 12, if your child is emotionally immature to the level that there's still some oppositional times, not necessarily ODD, but oppositional behavior in the moment or stubbornness, tantrums, what have you. But to give choices. So your negotiation with that age level is through giving choice. So you can have A or B, and you want to be fine with both of those so that it doesn't matter which one gets done first. The choice isn't A, B, or don't do anything. The choice is A or B. And after a while, that becomes much easier for kids to understand, because they get to choose, but the choice is narrow. So you're staying within a structure and a framework, but you're also saying, I trust you to choose the one that you want to do first, or one instead of another, depending on what it is. And you can do this with chores. Do you want to clean your room first, or do you want to do your schoolwork first? If those things both have to be done, and then chunk down the activities. So you're negotiating, well, try 15 minutes in your room, cleaning off just the bed or just this section of the floor. Plan it out so that they're doing a little bit at a time, learning a skill, working within the framework that you've set, but negotiate to a certain extent so that there is a sense of ownership for your younger children. As they get to preteen and teenage years, the negotiation is a little bit different. It's more about asking the question, what would you like to do? If you have a choice between doing your work first or spending an hour with your friends, which one would you rather do? With an understanding that the work needs to be done, but if an hour hanging out with your friend or talking to them or getting outside for a bit is going to energize you, that's what I want to hear as a parent. Let me know what's going to work best for you so we can negotiate the terms with the understanding that the deadline's still the deadline. So you're not changing what your expectations are of your children. You're changing the way you make your requests, and you're giving that power to your teenager, and again, even to middle schoolers, when they're 12 through 14, they have an opportunity to think about what's going to be best for them. When I'm coaching, I'll ask the question, well, if you choose to go with your friends first, how will that have a positive or negative impact on getting your work done after? So we have a conversation. And typically, they know the answer is, if I'm with my friends, I tend to get really into what we're doing and I get distracted and I lose track of time. Okay, great, you're noticing that. What would it be like for you to do your homework or your summer reading, whatever it is, and then go out and not have to worry as much about that deadline? How would that feel for you? How do you think it would work? Are you willing to try it? That's the conversation you want to have versus, no, you always get distracted. I need you to do this homework first. Have the conversation. Increase your kid's level of awareness from wherever it is in that moment to just a tiny bit more, and continue to use those strategies in order to shift so that your kids will be willing to negotiate with you rather than being demanding. We don't want to end up with children who are saying, I want this and I want that. So here's my last point before we get into questions. Consider your needs. as an adult, as a parent, as a human being, as a man or a woman, what is going to be helpful for you to get the downtime that you need and helping your children to get what they need. You want to find activities that are going to be mutually beneficial. If you're not into roller coasters and you're going to lose your lunch every time you get on one, then you need to come up with a different way to negotiate that. Who will go on the roller coaster with your kids if that's not your thing? How will you arrange that particular fun? Because you'd rather sit on a bench with a nice coffee and relax a little bit. Put on your earbuds and listen to some music so that you don't hear all the noise that's going around or the screams from the roller coaster. You deserve that. We all deserve to do what's best for us, the same as some kids would love to ride the roller coaster and someone else might just want to go swim in a quiet pool. So consider your needs as well and what you want to do so that it's not all about your kids, and conversely, it's not all about you. It's an opportunity to find a way to blend in both so that you have downtime and enjoyment. If you're just as active a learner as your children and you like to be out there doing and running and playing with them, that's absolutely fine. Just think about what type of breaks do your kids need and what type of break do you need when you're out there going. Because an all-day sightseeing or carnival rides or going to an amusement park or what have you, spending a day at Disney, it's exhausting. So consider and build in those downtimes that'll work for everyone so that you can all say at the end of the day, wow, we're exhausted, but we had a great time. So I'm ready for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Jodi. It's really interesting. Lots of questions. Can we talk a little bit about video games? There are so many parents who are saying that it is really hard to get their kids to do anything else. And they're really wondering how they should manage video games during the day and during the summer.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest really question. It is. And that's why I find that, first of all, I don't know who asked the question, but for all of you who are in this dilemma, and many parents are, we know that too much screen time is not good for anyone. I don't care whether your kids have ADHD or something else is going on or nothing specifically, but being hooked into that really changes physically and emotionally and mentally what's going on. Hunched up in that position is not good for them. They need to be doing exercise and activity. Hyper-focusing on something for a long time at the expense of everything else is not good. We know that. What I always wonder is how much our kids know, because I find myself having conversations on a regular basis with teenagers, and this is really 13 and up, as well as with college students and adults, about what do you notice when you are playing, and then what do you notice when you stop? So helping your kids to realize how they shift completely. Some kids tell me they're like a different person. So we want to bring that to their attention, and at the same time say, we're going to have limits. Summer is not the time to sit and be a vegetable. And I remember, that always being a vegetable was, in my generation, it's always, oh, you're just being a vegetable, you're just hanging out. Well, hanging out is good, but hanging out can be different from just sitting in front of the video games. So it's important to limit it, to use whatever you need, take the controllers away if you have a child who gravitates back toward that. Find an activity that I was talking about today that might be interesting. Doing something with a friend. It could even be creating some ideas for video games. Sit down with actual pen and paper or on a computer and type out what your ideal video game would be like. That's using their thinking, their skills, their creative side it's getting them outside of that video game box. But I would definitely set limits and just make that a family rule.
Jodi, how much screen time? People are really, a number of people have said, what's a reasonable amount of screen time max during the day?
Yeah, that's it's a tough question, but I just want to maybe give from my professional opinion is that there are people who say no more than 1 hour a day. Well, if you're breaking the day up, there's nothing wrong with a couple of hours spread out throughout the day. But the piece that can really, I guess, help parents to decide what's too much is what else is going on. The teenager that I mentioned who would have a tutors, SAT prep, a part-time job, how much time does that teenager really have to be sitting in front of that screen and then needing to transition out of that into doing other work? So it might be having that conversation, and I've had lots of these where it's, okay, your screen time needs to come at a time of day when you are not needing to be focused on your academics, whether that's during the school year or in the summer. But here in the summer, even though it feels like you have all the time in the world, you have things to do. At the same time, we don't want you to have it too late at night because you still have to get up in the morning even though you get an extra hour of sleep. So trying to negotiate that 1 hour or that 90 minutes and cutting it off can be the best way to do it for a teenager. A couple of times during the day can be all right for the younger kids, and especially when your games are age appropriate, and there are many that have some great learning objectives in them.
Well, to that point, here's a question I think, and it's mirrored by other people. My child loves video games but doesn't like to read. However, he realizes that he needs to improve his reading and the comprehension before going back to school. Is there any way to use video or computer to help his reading? And does that make sense to take this very seductive video game, which is an addiction for so many kids, and try to use it to improve learning? Or is it better just to keep those separate? Here's video games and here's learning over here.
Well, what studies have shown is that video games are really teaching skills. Okay. So by combining that, finding a more educational game, I know they're not like the ones that I used to have for my son, 20 years ago, but there are those that improve the reading skills and comprehension, and they can still be fun. So looking into those, I would still call them educational games, but there's a lot out there. And the other piece, too, is to connect. Here's where you connect, like I was mentioning, field trip and a book. What if there's a book on how to be the best video game player ever? Wow. You want to read that? That can connect the reading to the love of the video games. Something to that effect. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can use.
I guess part of this also is this dilemma for parents is the fact that schools and summer classes oftentimes now use technology. So, for example, Nora says this: my daughter is taking summer classes, and the work is on her school-issued iPad. But Facebook is also there, and it's a constant lure, and I can't take it off. Any suggestions? It's very distracting. Obviously, how do you monitor, especially with a middle schooler or the lure of social media, not just video games, but all the rest of the screen attractions?
Yeah, so you're saying on that school-issued, Facebook is iPad. On that particular iPad. There are ways to disable that on one end, first of all. I mean, you can remove yes, kids are smart and they know how to download the app. But if you're monitoring and every day, making sure that that's not on there, checking the history, I don't want to make people police their children, but there is a way to manage it. The other piece would be we all understand that sometimes our kids get sucked into or stuck on social media sites and they don't even realize they're there or how long they've been there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's truly oh my gosh, 3 hours went by. And
Wow.
so one way to manage that is to bring in timers. So when work is being done that needs to be focused on academics, have a timer go off every 20 minutes and ask your child to sit back, take a look, where am I and what am I doing? Because the truth is, the more they stay on track with the academics, the more time they'll have to do other things later. That doesn't always compute, but it's the absolute truth. If you go between academics and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat or whatever anyone's doing, and then you try to go back to your schoolwork, it's going to take twice as long. And we prove it all the time with students who are struggling with that, or they're getting in trouble for doing it. So setting up that guideline and making sure that there is a dedicated time for Facebook. We're not banning
Okay.
it.
Right. Am I understanding you correctly that academic work or reading or whatever it is going to be called should come before video games? Because
Yes.
there are a number of people here saying, they strike a deal with their child that they can do so much video games, and then when the time comes to stop or the transition, there's just a total meltdown, and they can't get them to move back to some other activity, whether it's academic or sports or whatever. So you're saying
Absolutely.
that the academic work should come first.
Yes, and the everything else is an incentive, but it's also part of the explanation that it's really, they can call me if they don't believe me, that truly get your academics done first, because you'll get it done faster and you'll have more time for everything else. Trying to transition and avoid that meltdown and everything else that goes with it, that will all go away if they do it first.
Mm-hmm.
And ask if they'll do an experiment and try it for you for a few days and see how that is.
Here's a great question from Lisa. What are some phrases or keywords that can help me positively present the idea of academic work, even fun-related work, when a teenager balks at the very concept of schoolwork in the summer?
I would call it an exploration, an investigation, an opportunity to find out more. You don't even have to use the word learn. Mm-hmm. Being curious, to even say, I'm really curious to find out, why that happened in history, or how that particular plant grows, or whatever it is. Would you be willing to help me investigate that? So that the investigation is not about schoolwork, but it does involve reading, writing, listening.
Okay,
exploring.
So not classic schoolwork, but activities that end up engaging those parts of the brain, basically reading, writing, thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they know what their summer work is. If they have actual schoolwork to do, they have to do the schoolwork. So it's looking at other things as a way to learn and improve their skills in a non-traditional way of learning.
Okay. Can you give I think you gave some other examples, say appropriate to a 12-year-old. And again, keep in mind that many parents are not at home during the day. Many people are working. So,
right. One of the things, as far as if I just use reading as an example, if you just want to help your kids improve their reading, to ask if they can spend an hour, if there's someone there monitoring them, and that's what's always hard depending on the age, but to find specific information in a book. I mentioned those trivia and history books, the history fun facts. There are a lot of things out there that are even appropriate for young adults and adults. So looking at some of those things and finding the answers to questions. Now, it might be that they find that on the computer because that's our world right now. But to come up with that information for you and either email it to you, or you check if you're checking in during the day, have them tell you, what the 5 things they found or whatever it is. But to find a way to go back to traditional books, to even just go to the library and say, I don't care what it is, just pick something. That's usually not the case. we sort of steer our kids toward what they might need to do or what we think it would be helpful. But just kind of letting that go and allowing for curiosity around reading anything about anything is still helping build their skills.
Okay. On that question of reading, I think a lot of children resist reading, and it becomes this, you will read for half an hour or whatever the rule is. How do you recommend handling that? I mean, clearly getting a child really interested in wanting to read on his or her own would be the best. But here's someone, Lisa, who says, I've been successful getting my son to love reading by saying I'll increase his bedtime by 30 minutes, but only for reading in bed. It's been amazingly successful. So
wow, that's great.
Yeah, that's great. Any other ways to get kids to read and love reading? I mean, that's the big one.
Well, I think part of it, the love of reading comes with the ease of reading. It's the same as any subject that our kids struggle with, that when they don't know how to do it properly or effectively, and they drift off, when their focus is off, it's so frustrating that they don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. So by easing the frustration, that's part of where the pick any book you want can come in, because you might think that your child needs to read at a certain grade level, but what if the comfort level right now is something a little bit different? So introducing that, and you can still have that, this is going to be reading time for everybody. So whether it's bedtime, if that works for some kids, it works for others. By then, depending on their focus and their medication, it doesn't work for them that late at night. But to have a time where everyone is reading, it doesn't matter whether it's a newspaper, a book, a magazine on a specific topic. There are plenty of really great science magazines. To find something that's of interest, and after the 30 minutes is up, to say, wow, you just spent, praise them for what they've done. You've made the effort. Started at 15 minutes and work up a little bit further, because we do tend to go into 30 minutes of reading, or the house will be quiet for an hour and a half and everybody does quiet stuff. For some kids with ADHD, that's excruciating.
Right, that's really tough.
Their brains are really needing something. So even books on tape, and then with that, having your child have the book as well. Right. So they're reading it while they're doing it.
I'm a huge fan of books on tape. I turned around my ADHD daughter, who became addicted to listening to Harry Potter, and listened, and in a couple of cases, to several volumes 8-10 times, and it transformed her vocabulary, her sentence structure. I mean, I think audiobooks are just magic, really. So I don't know if you agree, but
I do.
Really helpful.
Absolutely. And as I said, for some, if it's possible to read along with it, it can be really helpful to improve skills, because you're learning vocabulary and getting a sense of how certain words are pronounced. Mm-hmm. The intonation, even the punctuation, the pauses where they need to come in. It's a great way to learn.
It really is. Here's someone who said, second grade, we hired a tutor with amazing results. Once our son got the concept of how to read, he won't put books down, and the tutor used Humphrey books to get him involved, and even set up a stuffed hamster to get him involved. So that's a cute story. Yeah. It's true that if you can just hook kids on the content of the site, of the book, you're home free. Just dialing back a bit to technology, can you suggest specific video games that are helpful for learning, or specific websites? So many people are just saying, I'm just going to go with this technology thing and try to use it to my child's advantage. How do I do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And off the top of my head, I don't have them. I can get them. So if people want that information, they can email me, and I'll pull together the best ones out there. But look at even Google the top learning sites, or the top educational websites out there, and you'll find a lot. Even going and playing on Khan Academy can be
Khan Academy
interesting.
Is great. Yeah. We had a wonderful webinar with Randy Coleman, Kulman. You can find it on our website. He's a specialist in video games, and we just talked video games the entire time. He's been on several times, so you might want to go back if you're listening in and listen. Find that audio and listen to him, because he's a big believer in the fact that video games can be a learning tool. He's also very aware of the issues of, addiction and all the rest of it, but he does have many good suggestions on learning how to learn. Can we talk for a minute about sports? So many people would love to get their kids outside, but they say that, here's an example from Brenda. How do you motivate a teen who's not very active but doesn't enjoy physical activity? So that's not unusual, kids that just don't want to go outside. Oh, here, let me just mention Minecraft and Roblox, ROBLUX, that Lisa pointed out. Those are the two of the ones that Randy Coleman often suggests. So coming back to the physical activity.
There are a lot of teenagers who don't want to go out and do things in terms of physical activity. Often I find that asking those questions, this is where it's asking versus telling. What is it that might be an alternative? Are the martial arts, working out, in a gym, being able to do something that's an individual sport or activity versus a group? And that can come with emotional immaturity. I'm not ready for the group dynamic of being on the team. I don't feel comfortable or confident. So unless there's a way to find someone else who has something in common with your child and see if you can connect them with a common sport, which does work. The other option is to find out what might your child want to do individually. I've had students who do workout tapes. They'll go and do martial arts, which is fabulous for the focus and the body and the brain, everything. So that's another way of doing it. Sometimes the outside, for sensory reasons, can just be a no-go for some kids for a while. But asking what it is that would be enjoyable, that's not about sitting in front of a screen. I think that helps a lot, rather than assuming that there's a certain way that your child needs to get exercise.
Right. Good question here from someone whose child is in day camp every day from 9 to 3, and she's wondering how to work in learning activities given those time constraints.
I would say if the weekend time is available to do one special thing, it could just be for a couple of hours, getting out and doing something, or doing something at home together, that can pull together those learning activities. Depending on the energy level after camp, and I know it can be exhausting on hot days, it's possible to do something in an evening. Even watching a show, a 1-hour show or a movie, and asking your child to pick out some things in that movie. For example, what was your favorite part and why? Which character did you like the most? Similar to what teachers ask our children to do when they read books, like a character study. So you can do that with your favorite show, or talking about even the cooking shows, Master Chef and all that. You can look at the ingredients. How do people measure the ingredients? How do you think they know what to put in there? What senses would they use? What skills do they have to have? So you can have a conversation and even an investigation, some research around something that involves skill building.
Okay. That's interesting. I guess the last question, we're almost out of time. What about cognitive programs like CogMed or Brainwave or brain training programs? Is that helpful, and is that something that can be done over the summer instead of classic academic work?
Well, there's still a big split in the belief in the value of those. There are some studies out there that say that they work, but I find family to family that I'll get one family walks in and says, this didn't work for us, and another, it's fabulous. Right. What you have to remember is if you're going to do something like that, that it needs to be consistent. that you can't just start it and then pull it away in order for the changes to take place. Another one that I really encourage people to look at, because I had an in-depth conversation with one of the coach who's also a practitioner, is heart math. Heart math is another one, and there is a lot of research around heart math. And I've, as I said, just within the last couple of weeks, I said, okay, tell me everything there is to know about heart math. So look heart math up online. And again, if you have other questions, I can connect you with this person to, not to sell you anything, but just to give you some feedback. And I think the researcher who started it, who developed it, that he's connected on the site as well.
Okay, great. So everyone, our time has come to a close. Jodi, thank you again, and thank everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great summer.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly.